Welcome to the Weekly Dose Podcast, your one-stop shop for the weekly news in incretin mimetic therapies, with your host, ManOnMounjaro, Dave Knapp. Welcome to the Weekly Dose Podcast, your one-stop shop for incretin mimetic news, obesity medicine news, type 2 diabetes news. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, ManOnMounjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Mounjaro, Zepbound, any of those pens, that's what we talk about here. This is the podcast for the week of June 25th, 2024. June is slipping out of our grasp. The summer is fast wasting away. It's just crazy how time flies. But thank you all for being here with me today. I can't wait to jump into the news. Hat tip to our producer, Clark Kent, for putting together a lot of the news that we're going to cover today. First thing I want to get into is getting to 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, a huge milestone for the YouTube community. Thank you all for everyone who is a part of the YouTube community. Of course, this podcast, the video version, gets uploaded to the members only on the YouTube channel. And then after a couple days, it goes live and you can catch the video version of this over on YouTube. So make sure you check that out. Thank you all for those who have supported us on YouTube. Novo Nordisk made a big announcement this week that they are indeed investing $4.1 billion additional dollars into manufacturing facility in Clayton, North Carolina. Now, this is interesting because North Carolina seems to be becoming ground zero for incretin mimetic production. Obviously, you know about the Eli Lilly investments in their manufacturing facilities there, but this is a Novo Nordisk expansion, $4.1 billion additional dollars to be completed by 2027 through 2029. I think the interesting thing to consider there when we talk about the expansion of the facility that Novo Nordisk has there is just the fact that they're investing so much into the future, right? So this likely will affect the manufacturing more of high-dose semaglutide, of CagriSema, of the amycretin, some of the pipeline medications that will really be game changers. They're building out infrastructure because that's just the only way to meet demand, which leads into a nice little segue. We heard this week, it was a big week in the world of news for type 2 diabetes. Medications like incretin mimetics, as it was the annual ADA conference. And we heard a little bit from Viking Therapeutics. And, you know, Viking Therapeutics is an interesting one because many people have kind of come into the comments of the various videos that I've done, whether it's on TikTok or YouTube, and they're like, what is going on with the stock for Viking Therapeutics? It goes up, it goes down. And, you know, I think the interesting thing, and this is also a sentiment that's been echoed by Cloakster over on YouTube, and I 100% agree. You know, if you look at Viking Therapeutics, they have really interesting molecules, and we heard about another one this week, even on top of VK2735 or Viking Tide, as we call it on this channel. You know, they have really great assets in the pipeline, but it seems like their go-to-market strategy is where they don't really have a game plan. When their CEO was asked just a few weeks ago about what they plan to do to manufacture pens, he said, well, we plan on tapping into existing manufacturing infrastructure that already exists. And I'm hard-pressed to believe that that would ever be an option, considering Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly are printing money right now and virtually using a ton of that money that they're printing to gobble up manufacturing capacity, whether it's the acquisition of Catalent on Novo Nordisk side, or you saw several acquisitions on the Eli Lilly side, acquiring companies that have the ability to produce pens and peptides. And so I think what you're going to see is Viking Therapeutics is going to come to market and there's going to be nobody to manufacture the pens. So I think that plays into it. I think that you have a lot of hype around what the dual incretin that they have, the VK2735, can do. They're ramping up the dosages in the clinical trials, and you really, I think, are going to see a more effective drug than tirzepatide. But I think the more interesting element to VK2735 is that they have a pill form, right? And we've talked about that well on this channel, so I won't beat that into the ground. So I think you see a lot of hype around it, but then not maybe a great go-to-market strategy. Of course, they're having to raise capital to bring these to phase 3 trials. It's a smaller company. Typically, you'll see these smaller companies partner with a larger company to go through these phase 3 clinical trials. You saw that with survodutide. Of course, you had a smaller a smaller drug manufacturer working with Boehringer Ingelheim on that one. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see that down the line, but I think there's just some uncertainty about a stock that is really highly valued. Of course, we did hear, as I teased a little bit earlier, they presented a new research dual amylin and calcitonin receptor agonist at the ADA 2024 conference. And this is a really interesting one because they sort of teased it up, paired it up against cagrilintide, which is the amylin agonist from Novo Nordisk being combined with semaglutide. And so it's interesting as you see these sort of, additional pathways for weight loss that will ultimately likely be paired with another, probably a GLP-1 or a GIP. And then you see them being paired against something like cagrilintide, which is not actually a standalone medicine that is coming to the market in the form of CagriSema. So it's cagrilintide plus semaglutide to sort of enhance the weight loss effects or the glucose control effects of existing GLP-1 medications. But they paired this one against cagrilintide and showed that it was far superior at reducing food intake. And so this is, again, a dual amylin and calcitonin receptor agonist. And you see Eli Lilly also has their own version of this in phase 1 clinical trials. So as these medications sort of evolve, you see just enhancing the weight loss through new pathways, and the DACRAs will be an interesting one to watch down the line. But we'll see on Viking Therapeutics, right? Tread lightly anytime. None of this news that we bring here is considered investment news or anything like that, just to help you understand the medications from the patient perspective, what's out there, what's coming down the pipeline, and offer some hope for the people that don't see the kind of benefits or effects that the current treatments bring. So it'll be an encouraging thing to follow that one, and to be able to follow Viking Therapeutics in general, who is an intriguing follow for sure. Of course, the biggest news of this week, in my humble opinion, was the release of generic liraglutide. So we heard from Teva Pharmaceuticals this week that they have the first FDA-approved GLP-1 generic in the form of liraglutide. Now, this is for the diabetes indication, so the Victoza indication. Of course, liraglutide is a daily injection. Interestingly enough, and we've covered this several times on different videos on this channel, but liraglutide, which is a daily injection in the form of Saxenda and Victoza from Novo Nordisk. Basically, semaglutide is very molecularly similar to liraglutide, and I think that's why you see a lot of the patents being challenged, because there was only minor tweaks to liraglutide to convert it to semaglutide, which is a weekly injection versus a daily injection. So this injection will be coming in the form of 2 pens per month, right? So you get 1 pen for the first 2 weeks, 1 pen for the second week, 2 weeks, and you take that shot daily. And so what you'll see with liraglutide, if you're watching over on YouTube, is you have these little tips that go on the end of a pen, similar to the Ozempic pen. So you don't have to have a single pen for each day. So that's the good news when we talk about pen shortages, is it's not 30 pens. It is just 2 pens for the whole month, which is actually an improvement on tirzepatide's presentation. But it'll be interesting to see this one come to market. Of course, we don't have dates as to when exactly that will hit the market or pricing, but what you can definitely bank on, and you can check more on the article at OnThePen.com that we did on this earlier this week, but don't expect the price to be that much different than the brand name right away. It usually takes a couple of months, a few months to a couple of years for the price to really come down significantly on these medications. I think the one positive is, as one of our great members of the community, Michelle Hess, pointed out over on Instagram, is that typically it's easier to get a off-label medication in generic form than it is to get the branded version through insurance. And so even though this is the diabetes indication, perhaps we'll see some insurance companies, because over the long haul, the price point should come down a little bit, maybe prefer that should be on something like a liraglutide, which, even though the clinical trials show semaglutide and tirzepatide to be far superior from a weight management standpoint, it is an option. And there are many, many people within our community who have lost up to 100 pounds using liraglutide as an aid. So it'll be an interesting one to watch. Kudos to Teva Pharmaceuticals for being the first. There will be others coming. Others have applied for the ability to manufacture this. So it'll be a very interesting story, and a very interesting kind of thread to follow with the generic liraglutide. On the topic of expanded accessibility to GLP-1s, we saw a new version of the Wegovy coupon drop this week, and this one is much more similar to the coupon that we've seen, or the copay savings card, I should say, that we've seen for tirzepatide, Zepbound on the Eli Lilly side. So let's just kind of cover how this works. So first of all, if you cannot find Zepbound anywhere and your doctor has been mentioning Wegovy, but maybe Wegovy's not on your formulary, maybe Zepbound wasn't either, maybe you don't have weight loss coverage rider on your insurance policy, this is a way to get branded medication for cheaper than the list price, right? But still pretty expensive. So basically you have to have insurance, and you have to have commercial insurance. So again, you're excluded, unfortunately, from this savings card if you are on government-sponsored health insurance programs. That excludes marketplace insurance. Marketplace insurance is a different ballgame. That is considered commercial under this definition here. But if you're on TRICARE or Medicare or Medicaid, those are going to be excluded from this savings card. But essentially, if you have commercial insurance without obesity coverage, meaning it won't pay anything towards Wegovy, they will drop your price down to $650. Now, that's still $150 more than the same card on the Eli Lilly side for Zepbound. But perhaps the win is with a fourfold increase in manufacturing capacity prior year, as Novo Nordisk has recently told us, Wegovy might be an easier one for you to get your hands on. And so Wegovy offering a potential game changer for some of you who are maybe using compound semaglutide. If you're looking to get the branded medication, still $650 is an outrageous price tag to pay on the Wegovy side of things. But we do see that Bernie Sanders does have the CEO of Novo Nordisk coming in a little bit later year to testify on the cost of Wegovy and Ozempic. Of course, this on top of reports that they could manufacture it and still turn a profit for $5 per dose. You know, this is a whole nother loaded conversation within the community, but it'll be interesting to see from the drug company's perspective what they see as potentials to drive down the cost of this medication. Continuing on our topic of savings cards, new Mounjaro cards. So the Mounjaro savings card, for those who did not have insurance coverage, expired at the end of June. Those who did have coverage, it was through the end of the year. But for those who do not have coverage, you saw an update to the card. It extended out another 6 months. Very similar terms to the ones that you have seen before, but that can be downloaded at Mounjaro.com. Make sure that your pharmacy is aware that that new card is available when you go to fill your prescription next time. Not a huge update, but definitely noteworthy if you're somebody who takes advantage of the Mounjaro savings card. We saw some amazing news come out from Eli Lilly this past week on the full results of the sleep apnea study. So the obstructive sleep apnea study, to be more specific. Very fascinating find there, as 52% of patients who were in this trial with obstructive sleep apnea saw resolution of their obstructive sleep apnea. Now, on the heels of this, you saw stocks like ResMed take a nosedive, as this is really going to put a dent ultimately in the treatment for obstructive sleep apnea. Prior to now, there haven't been any pharmaceutical remedies for this condition. You just saw treatments, right? CPAP therapies and things like that. So this resolved sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea, in 52% of patients. I saw some interesting reporting this week from some doctors on Twitter who are hypothesizing that it has to do with fat, the fat percentage in the tongue and the reduction of that. And sort of obviously when you're talking obstructive sleep apnea, it's because there's an obstruction, right? And this resolved that. So many people said, is it just the weight loss? Is it something that the medication is doing? Of course, there's a lot of reduction of inflammation and things like that. Could that be contributing? Whatever it is, I don't think we have complete clarity on that right now. Of course, the weight loss does not hurt. When you can reduce your weight by a significant amount, it actually resolves many things. And so this is just one more thing, one more feather in the cap of tirzepatide. Now, the interesting thing for those who are on Medicare, so we just talked about the savings card and how savings cards don't work for you. By the end of the year, I would fully expect that we will see Zepbound added to the formulary for Medicare for obstructive sleep apnea treatment. So if you are somebody who suffers from obstructive sleep apnea and you're on Medicare, this may be one of those backdoor ways into getting tirzepatide vis-a-vis Zepbound through Medicare Part D plans a little bit later in the year. So absolutely amazing news and exciting news for those who are on Medicare. It's always nice to be able to bring some good news to those folks who are dealing with Medicare, because Medicare is a real bear to deal with. Let's talk a little bit about amylin agonism to round out the week. Petrelintide. from Zealand Pharmaceuticals. Now, that's the small company that I was referencing earlier that has survodutide in conjunction with Boehringer Ingelheim. But Petrelintide is one of their amylin agonists that they have in clinical trials. And we got some phase 1 study data back from Petrelintide where patients lost, and again, this was a monotherapy, so they weren't combining it at this point with any other GLP-1 or GIP incretin mimetic. This is standalone, where they saw 8.6% weight loss over 16 weeks compared to semaglutide, which was much less than that, and it was just a little under where tirzepatide was for the same duration. Very interesting news to see that amount of weight loss out of an amylin agonist, which again, we talked about earlier, CagriSema, Petrelintide, their amylin agonist. You see just the proliferation of these other pathways. And this is exciting news because you'll probably see, for those who need a little boost in the weight loss, down the line, Petrelintide coupled with survodutide potentially, and survodutide, of course, being the GLP-1 and glucagon agonist. So you get all those cardiometabolic effects, reduction of fatty liver disease and MASH. And then on the flip side, adding the amylin agonist in there, which will help to sort of work on that pathway of satiety. Just some powerful, powerful drugs in the pipeline. I always like to say, let not your heart be troubled if you are a slower responder to the current generation of GLP-1 medications, because there are better things coming. Of course, Petrelintide is one of those. Just fascinating, fascinating news. Lots of great content from this past week at OnThePen.com, whether you're looking at the additional news that we covered on the DPP-4 and how DPP-4 breaks down GLP-1, natural GLP-1, and how that can affect your weight loss journey, especially if you're diabetic. You're producing gut bacteria that's producing DPP-4 in overdrive. And so make sure you get over to OnThePen.com. Don't miss a thing. Sign up for email alerts. We would love to have you as part of the community over there. Until next week, thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for being the best part of what we do at On The Pen, and we'll catch you next week.